Welcome to WP-Tonic, episode 119. Today we're discussing website redesigns. What should you consider? What are the things that you should be looking out for? And how do you go about doing your website redesign? Before we get into today's show, I'd like to remind you, WP-Tonic, the service at WP-Tonic.com is a WordPress maintenance service that helps you with your legacy clients. If you're a designer or developer and you're getting busy or you're raising your rates and you have legacy clients that you still want to provide service to, WP-Tonic can help you with that by taking over some of your legacy clients. Our panel today is Sally Getch, Jackie D'Elia, and Jonathan Denwood. Panel, would you like to introduce yourselves? This time we'll go counterclockwise, so Jackie.
Hi, I'm Jackie D'Elia with Jackie D'Elia Design. I build websites for clients and help them with their brand. And I'm also the host of Rethink.fm.
Very good. And you definitely do check out that podcast as well. I will plug that, Rethink.fm. Jonathan.
Yeah, I'm the founder of WP-Tonic, like John so graciously put. We help you with your legacy clients. If you're a developer, designer, WordPress consultant, send them to us and we deal with those legacy clients in a great way.
Yes. I'm Sally Getch. My business is WP Fangirl. I help businesses and nonprofits to make great WordPress websites that work for them. I'm the organizer of the East Bay WordPress meetup in Oakland, California. And, you know, I keep trying to convince those clients that they need to go to Jonathan and stop pestering me for all their little updates.
Very, very good. And I am John Locke. I run a WordPress consultancy here in Sacramento, California called Lockdown Design. And I specialize in helping businesses with various things like local SEO and setting up e-commerce. So before we get into our main topic today, we've got 3 news stories. The first WordPress news story is WordPress 4.6 Pepper was released. So we'll start with Sally. What can you tell us about this?
You know, there was an article a couple of weeks ago about, you know, how, you know, WordPress doesn't really have landmark releases anymore with really big, exciting features in them. And it's partly because the frequency of releases got speeded up considerably. So the change between one version and the next one is not going to be as dramatic. So there are some under the hood things about term queries that look interesting to me, but I haven't had time to investigate them. But, you know, the thing you noticed first is that they've switched to using system fonts in the admin. And I especially noticed it because the system font is smaller at the same pixel size than my than the Open Sans font. You know, I saw some people saying, wait, did they change the font size? No, they just changed the font. You know, the irony is that I've actually used Open Sans as the font for some of my other system stuff like Outlook because I prefer it to the system font in Windows. So, you know, this is sort of, you know, a minor irritation. It's not a problem. I've updated a bunch of sites and nothing broke. You know, I'm not sure to what degree I'll be making use of the additional Shiny update options for themes, since I tend to build a lot of child themes and they don't have automatic updates.
Yeah, totally. And I did notice that too. That was the very first thing I noticed is it's the same pixel size, but because it's switching to system fonts, which is basically what you have on your machine, and not Open Sans. It looks a lot smaller. Jackie, what have you noticed?
I like the way
what's
that the
exciting for you
plugin
with
updates
WordPress
work now. I think that's a
4.6?
little cleaner and it's a lot less back and forth on the different screens. It's more of a cohesive use of that of the whole process, because normally you would have to download the plugin or install the plugin, and then you'd get sent to another screen to activate it. And so I like the way that that works, and I like especially like when you're updating a lot of plugins, you've got a nice the way that it's set up right now, it's working a lot better. So I think that'll be easier for people to understand. I think the user interface is better on that.
No, and I really do enjoy that too. You don't have to switch to a different screen to update your plugins. I think that is a lot smoother. You can kind of see it, happening. So I definitely think that's good. Jonathan, what things in 4.6 are you most excited
Well,
about?
excited. I wouldn't quite say excited, but I think I agree with Jackie and Sally. Obviously, the thing that kind of showed up straight away is the new font. And how that works. And it's surprising how you just kind of, it looks really different, doesn't it? It's a small change like that. It's amazing, really. And I totally agree with Jackie. The way the plugins are now being handled is a lot cleaner. On the bad side, well, it's not exactly bad because I managed to get a couple of new clients, is if you do, which is bound to happen, but I just sense it's a lot more at the present moment. It took down quite a few sites because there were some quite, I wouldn't say massive, but under the hood, there were some significant changes that I'm trying to find the right words here, if your theme hadn't been coded to maybe the letter of the recommendations, that you could have some problems, and but maybe that just goes with the territory. But I just sense there's a little bit more people having problems.
Right. Well, the Studio Press people did a good job of getting the word out about you need to update Genesis before you uppress, because they had discovered that your site would break if you didn't, and somebody posted a how to fix it if for some reason you didn't get the message. And I hadn't thought about it, but it doesn't surprise me that much that there are other themes where either they didn't the author didn't update the theme, or the user didn't update the theme before updating WordPress.
I think there's going to be a lot of issues going forward as things continue to progress in WordPress, especially with older plugins that a lot of people are using and older themes, because themes are the most difficult to get updated. Most people, nobody's going to be pushing updates to themes. Most of the themes end up being customized by the user. And plugins, the repository has a lot of plugins in there, and they send out notices, make sure your plugins are compatible. And I just wonder how many of them that haven't been updated in a year or 8 months or 12 months, whatever, haven't looked at those things. And like you're saying, some of the users end up having their sites come down when they update WordPress, and a lot of hosts are automatically updating WordPress now, so it's not even where you're planning it. It's just you got a note saying, yeah, WordPress has been updated and you might have some problems now.
No, and definitely, I think especially because so many people use theme forest themes, and I've run into this a number of times, like people don't have the original license to it, and so they don't update it, or if they update WordPress, they're still using a theme from like a year and a half ago. That's very common. So it's very important to if you're buying a premium theme, keep that licensed so that you can get updates. The things that I'm most excited about, I think, in this is there's one, an improved disaster recovery mode, where say you're in the content editor, say you're editing like post, WordPress will automatically save the post title, content, and excerpt in the browser every 15 seconds. I know where I'm at, like the internet can be really spotty sometimes, and just like not be there from just suddenly. So that's pretty cool. The other thing that is significant, I think, is they've standardized registered meta, and there's some enhancements there. They've decreased the arguments from 4 to 3, so that's something to be aware of. And there's now a WP post type for each registered post type, so that will be a little bit more predictable. Say if you're doing like some hardcore development, instead of just having WP post, you got post type. So I think that's pretty good. Going into our second news story, this kind of seemed to be the big news story of the week. It kind of blew up on WP Tavern, is this article called Us versus Them. And basically it was just kind of outlining a lot of frustration that people have been having, maybe in sensing that the WordPress core team and then kind of everybody else who is not the core team, maybe they're at odds. And Sally, what are your thoughts on this?
You know, I don't have any personal experience of it. I have heard from some people that you know, there are times when you make suggestions about things that should be improved in WordPress, you know, that some people have just sort of been dismissed without much explanation or consideration, and then they become rather cynical about it. You know, I've never tried to submit a patch to core, or to you know, make an uninvited suggestion. You know, although, you know, I've heard lots of people say, and I believe it's true, you know, the code of WordPress would be better if you went back and rewrote it from the beginning. But you know, then you're going to break backwards compatibility. You're going to, you know, there are reasons why things are not as simple as you think they are. So, you know, I can't tell what, you know, whether there are some people who, you know, frequently behave badly. I have met a number of the core team members. They all seem like perfectly nice people to me. But I can also understand that if you're under a lot of pressure to get something done, you might be a little short with people who are insisting that you need to do it another way. And I can also understand that if you're one of those people making a well-meant suggestion, you might be distressed if you feel like you got the brush off.
And I think that's a totally human reaction. And I'll just say I think this is more like a human issue than it is necessarily like a WordPress issue. But Jackie, what do you think about this article? I thought the comments were like fascinating.
I read the article, and the things that jumped out the most to me were Morton's comments, which I thought were very good. And I think everybody who is interested in reading this article, don't just read the article, go down through and read the comments, and especially read what Morton wrote, because that to me is just spot on and right on target as far as what's really needed going forward. And I won't try to summarize exactly what he said, but go read it. See if you feel the same way.
No, and I totally agree. Yeah, and you know, I think sometimes like when you're working on a project like, you know, as large as like WordPress, and it's huge because we're powering, you know, 26% of all the websites. I think that people who are involved in it every day, they do have kind of an internal language that maybe is like difficult for people on the outside to kind of relate to.
One thing Morton pointed out, on there that is worth noting is that having long-term roadmaps for everybody to see would be really helpful. And I think that's for the most people who are not involved in core or not working on core, it's difficult to know what's coming down the road and what the longer term plans are. And I think having open community discussions about that and actually having a roadmap that shows kind of where we plan to be the end of next year, the end of the year after that, would be really helpful for a lot of people who are working on the outside of WordPress, maybe working on plugins, maybe working on themes, and just kind of having a general idea of where we're headed. And if we don't know where we're headed and we're not willing to publicly share that, then that would be a concern.
No, I think I totally agree with that. I think having like a more transparent roadmap of where it's going would help everyone. And I do think communication is as it is in all things. I think communication is the key to making sure that everybody is kind of on the same page with this. Jonathan, what are your
Well,
thoughts?
once again, I agree with Jackie. You really need to read the comments, and I thought Morton's remarks were spot on, and he's consistently been saying that he was going to try and join us, but he's probably busy with his baby. But he's been really consistent in his comments, not in general, and also on this show when he's joined us about this particular subject, and I totally agree with him. I see it as there's different layers to this. There's personal animosity that comes out. Some people just don't get on with one another in any community. They just don't like one another, and that's just part of life, isn't it? But like I agree with Morton that I do feel that there's something deeper as well, and that's a structural problem about how the WordPress foundation is organized, how decisions are made, how public those decisions are, how mistakes are dealt with, all these type of things. And he's been consistently saying that something needs to be done, and I agree with him, but it does seem to be falling on deaf ears, really, doesn't it?
Yes.
I think just more communication is what's needed, but it definitely both sides need to listen and kind of get together and there definitely needs to be some more outreach from the core team to the rest of the community to make them feel like they are being heard. I think that would go.
I actually disagree, John. I understand where you're coming from, John, but I actually think there's a structural problem in the way that WordPress, the WordPress Foundation is organized and run. And there's a lot of talk about community and community spirit and democracy, but how the actual core structure is run is not democratic, is not community based. There's a lot of the right and is it, when you go to WordCamp or you meet some of the major contributors, they are, like what Sally said, seem really nice people. But I agree with Morton that there's a fundamental problem with the structure of how this community and the WordPress Foundation is organized that really needs to be sorted out.
It does seem as if things have not, things have not necessarily moved on in terms of the structure from the early days when you had a much smaller community, and it was, it's always easier to get in on something at the beginning of it, and then later on there are more barriers to participation, not intentionally, but just because, well, you haven't been there for that long history of what people have built up so far, and you end up getting an effect of an in-group because you have a team of people who've been working together for a long time, and becoming a new member of that team is not so easy. You have to have something in place for onboarding and so on and so forth. And I think Morton is right. This is an issue that afflicts many organizations as they grow, and it is exacerbated by the fact that most of the work is done on a volunteer basis.
Well,
no, and that does make it hard. It's open source. So sorry.
No, also, I might be totally wrong here. It's only my personal reflection, is that there is And I think you could sense that in some of the tone of the article, is that there's a feeling that you're either in or you're given a black ball and you're out, and it's not really very clear why you're out or why you're no longer one of the chosen, one of the inner group. There's a lot of feeling around that, and it's a bit of a cancer, because if it grows, it is going to become a major problem.
And like I said, I do think that, as any organization, as it grows, you need to put can't be saying, as you grow, there needs to be some sort of assessment. And again, I think this is not specifically like a WordPress problem. This is like just a human problem in general. I think there's always going to be like some degree of like misunderstanding. And I guess I can see both sides, and definitely there are people that feel like they're not being heard. And there has been a lot of frustration, I think, in the general community of like, how do we, get our voices heard by the core team. But I think you kind of have to do that. I think you have to go through the steps and kind of like be initiated into that. And earn some trust with the core team as a contributor. And I think somebody was writing, I can't remember if this is in the comments or somewhere else, but you kind of have to, from what I understand, like kind of like learn to speak their language in a way, to kind of become part of that. And so maybe that's, some people are just, it's too much of a barrier for them, and it's off-putting. And maybe that's part of the issue. So. It is a big project, and they're doing a great job, but they are running at 110 speed, as Morton said. So maybe slowing down and be a little better. What do you think, Jonathan? Are we about ready for a break?
Yes, we are, John. It's time to go for our first break.
Okay, so we're going to go for our first break, and then we're going to come back with the main topic, which is going to be all about website redesigns. What should you consider? What things are you looking out for? What things should you be planning for? And we'll see you after the break. All right, we're back, and we're talking with our Saturday morning panel. We are here every Saturday on Fire Talk, 10 a.m. Saturdays Pacific time and 1 p.m. Eastern time. You can get a free ticket. You can join our chat, watch us live, and participate. So our main topic is website redesigns. What should you be considering? I'm going to start with this question, and I'll go clockwise. Sally. Actually, I'll go Sally, Jackie, and Jonathan. Why do people even want to redesign their site anyway? Why should they bother? I mean, look, I've got a business. It's open. It's been here for 20 years, and my website hasn't been changed in 10 years, and I'm not going out of business yet. Why do I even need to redesign my site? Sally?
Okay. So, I had been planning to update my business website for years. I mean, there were a couple of different possible themes I'd gone through, and because my portfolio was outdated, and there was it needed to be refreshed, but I was busy and I didn't get around to it. And the thing that finally pushed me into it was the approach of Mobilegeddon, because my site was so old that it was not mobile friendly. And Google made it clear, we're going to start penalizing you in mobile search if your site is not mobile friendly. And I also have been having some experience of the number of site visitors that I got that were using tablets or phones. So I finally sat down and pushed through getting the site up, even if the portfolio wasn't totally complete, and I made sure there was enough in there to be useful, so there are sometimes very specific things that you discover such and such is broken and it matters to your business.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. So Jackie, have you found that like a lot of people contacted you for redesign, like when they heard that Google was going to drop the hammer on them in Mobilegeddon?
I think that has been a concern for people, that their website wasn't accessible, and it depends on the business that you're talking about. If you're a retail store or a garden center or something where there's a real likelihood that people are going to be visiting your site on a mobile device and expecting to get some information that they need, like directions, phone number, things like that, that's a real catalyst for wanting a site redesign if your current site doesn't support that. Some other things are just diminishing returns on your existing website. You're not seeing the traffic that you used to get. You are not getting the leads that you got. If you have a website that is, you have a business where your website is generating leads for you that is actually feeding sales into your business, if you're noticing that you're getting diminishing returns on that, or if you never had a site where you could dynamically generate content, where you had a static site for years and nothing was ever updated on your site, and now you wanted to start sharing, writing blog posts and finding different ways of marketing and integrating social media into your website. Those could be all really valid reasons why you would want to do a redesign.
No, it makes total sense. Jonathan, over there in Reno and Carson City and all the other people that you're servicing, do people, like, when they hear things like, hey, Google is going to penalize you for this or that, is that when people spring to action? And is that the only thing that makes people spring to action, is when they actually think that they're going to lose rank or sales or something like that?
Well, I think it really depends, but to be truthful about it, I think a lot of what we've just said, I would say 90% of the audience in Reno, in Northern Nevada, we would have lost them about 10 minutes ago about what we're talking about, to be quite truthful, John. They would have no comprehension, and I think that's one of the factors, and we've discussed that before on the panel show, is because we're mixing with WordPress people, we're really interested in the subject, we get in a bubble basically, and I don't know if that's different in where Jackie, in her local business community, and Sally and yourself, John, but in Reno, in Northern Nevada, I would have said that we would have lost a lot of people about 15 minutes ago in the normal business community.
So what does make people in Reno decide to update their websites?
It's envy and fear, really, Sally. It's either somebody, one of their competitors, has woken up and realized there's a lot of new people moving into Northern Nevada, and their normal network of really tight connections, which feeds them referrals. It's just they need to do more, and especially if they're not established or they're moving into a new sector. Somebody else has invested some money and time, and they got envy, or it's fear, Sally. Basically the business is starting to decline. They're finding it harder to get really quality referrals, and they know that they haven't really invested, and they're told by somebody they trust that they really need to do something about their online presence. So they're the two things, in my experience in Northern. It's either envy or fear that drives them to consider investing on their online presence, Sally.
I think that does broadly describe the things we've said more technically.
Okay. You guys made a great point, like Sally and Jonathan, both. The envy and fear are really like what in my experience too, that is like what drives like the majority of businesses. It's either fear that they're going to drop out of Google, or the sudden realization, maybe that they used to be number one or whatever in the top three, and now suddenly they're not. So there's that fear that their competitors are going to get all their business, or Google's going to drop them like a rock, or the envy that, like, hey, here's this person that's my competitor, and I'm aware of them, and they have a brand new site, and now they're, I need to do something to keep up. Because one thing that, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I agree with you on that point. And I think that sometimes clients will assume if their website's outdated, that people will think their business is as well. And I think that is also something that links together very well. If the competitors have modern, updated websites, mobile friendly and everything, they think they're hip. They know what's going on in their business community. And I think somebody who has a really, real old website will feel, when they look at others' websites, that maybe their customers will think they're not up to date on anything then, maybe not just their website. So I think it does create an impression.
And I think that's a reasonable fear, that if your website is not only old fashioned looking, but doesn't have current information on it, that people will get the impression that you're just not very with it.
If you see a website where they've got copyright at the bottom that's like, 6 years old, and they haven't updated the site, and you're thinking about contacting them to do business with them, you're gonna hesitate. I've had that happen where I've hesitated. Yes, I have. And I've looked for an alternative.
But Jackie, do you think that's because you're in the web development consultancy industry? Do you think that is something that you pick up instantaneously, but somebody in Reno or small town America who's not in a major metropolitan area is really that concerned about?
I look at websites completely differently than probably somebody who's not doing that for a living. When I go somewhere, I'll notice all the elements and how things are laid out. And I think some people don't. But I think usability is what they're after. So somebody who doesn't know anything about web design and goes to a website and has difficulty using it, they're not going to say, oh, well, this is poorly designed and this isn't, I don't like the layout of this. They're just going to say, this isn't working. Let's pick a different site to go to. And that's what will happen. I mean,
even people in small towns or provincial areas, if they're using the internet, if they're using the web, they are exposed to current trends in design because, they're going to Facebook, they're going to Amazon, and those places set expectations in their minds. But they're not conscious of it, but set expectations in their minds about how websites are supposed to work and what you should be able to do when you go to one. And so, they may not be able to sort of pick out the date, at which a certain older design was trendy or anything like that. They'll just know it doesn't look the way they're expecting it to look, or it doesn't do what they're expecting it to be able to do.
Well, exactly. Well, certainly going to a site that is not mobile friendly on a phone, you're going to quickly realize that, this isn't even usable for you. You can't see anything. You can't.
Yeah, I was being the devil's advocate a little bit there.
Gosh, Jonathan, how unusual.
Oh, that was so English, Sally. Like I say, you only spent 4 years, but you're more English than I am. But what I think you see even in large companies, how their website works on a mobile device is horrendous. I'm not talking small kind of regional or town-based business. I'm talking about companies in the Fortune 500, and their mobile presence is truly
and in that
truly
case, it's not that they
atrocious.
can't afford to have their website redesigned, but think about the number of people who have to sign off on the project in an organization of that size. I mean, if you're dealing with a freelancer or a business that's a couple of people, you've got a small number of decision makers. As long as they know, they can afford it and they're going to get something that helps their business, they can make the decision. You can go on and build the site. If you're dealing with a large corporation, it's going to take weeks or months for them even to say, all right, we should do this. And just as long for them to then decide what they should do.
No, and
yeah, but I'm
that's
sorry,
cool.
John.
I'm just gonna say, like, I think it really, like, the drive to redesign the site, it depends on industry, and it's by comparison. Like, and I think and I'll give you a good example, and tell me if you agree with this, but like accounting websites, like a lot of them are horribly outdated, at least like, around here, and there's like zero drive for like a lot of these people to update their site because all the other competitor sites are the same. They're, like 10 years behind. But in other industries, there's a huge push. What do you think?
Yeah, it's really quite strange. Also, a lot, especially in the financial, legal, where you have a lot of regular control over what can be said or supposedly said. I get the feeling that it's used as an excuse not to put original content, to try and do something slightly not kind of template industry
for a highly
based
regulated industry to do social participation or blogging or whatever, but they have to be more careful than someone else. But yeah, I think that it's easy to use barriers like that as an excuse not to bother doing anything.
Yeah, it's just, and also there's the darker side, because funny enough, I've had a couple of discussions this week with clients, we're just doing some minor. They've come on board on the WP-Tonic program, and I've just been discussing, and I just heard some horrendous stories outside of that about clients that gone to supposedly reputable, I don't know how to put this, but they've been taken, basically they've just had a horrendous experience and they've been taken to the cleaners. They've had a project where they have spent, given like 10, 15,000, and the project is either rubbish or it was never finished. The developer, the agency, did a runner with the money, never finished it, and you don't know all the ins and outs. But when you look at what was done, you just kind of shake your head. And so I was speaking to quite a few. They're really reluctant to update their site or engage with a freelance or a small agency because they just had such last time that they had such a horrendous experience.
You can't blame them. If they were ripped off to the tune of a chunk of money that they couldn't just pull out of a sock drawer, they're going to be very cautious, and they're not necessarily equipped to evaluate whether somebody's going to do a good job.
Yeah, I've found that they are either really naive when it comes to that, or they go over the top, like they get like 12 different quotations and they spend like 6 months doing it, or they only talk to one person that they're highly recommended, but that person doesn't really know what the hell they're doing, and because the person that recommended them has no ability to judge who they recommended in the first place. So I found it tends to be all over the place, where either they're just being recommended from a source that doesn't know enough to make a recommendation, or they go to the other extreme where they're just getting proposals left and right. And I still don't really understand that, and they get confused by too much information being sent to them, if I'm making any sense.
I think that's a great point, and that actually leads into something that I wanted to ask for sure. Would you say that they either kind of just throw a dart and choose somebody, or they send out they ask like everybody and their grandma for a quote, and then they're in decision paralysis. So, here's one of these questions, like, who should you ideally be looking for when you're looking to do a redesign, like an agency, a solo consultant? Do you want to hire somebody in-house? And what are the advantages and disadvantages of each of these avenues? Sally.
Okay, I think whether you want, a single person or an agency depends partly on the size of your site. If it is a big project and you have a ton of content, and it's going to need to be broken out into several people working simultaneously on different things, like the content strategy and the assessing the needs for functionality, doing the PHP work, doing the CSS work. You may want to have somebody who is either an agency or they've got a reliable group of subcontractors that they work with, so that you can get all of that covered. If you have a very small site and you don't necessarily need, custom design or, custom whatever, then one person may be able to handle it all. And there are people who are both, good at graphic design and do the whole development end of it. But it's more often you find that people are more specialized. I will say, find somebody who can go through a good discovery process with you and a needs analysis before you start hiring somebody to make designs, somebody to write PHP code, and so on. Because if so many people start with the design, and it's maybe a really pretty design and totally inappropriate to the type of content that you have. And so you really need to assess what it is you have and what you're trying to achieve, and then hire people who know that they're trying to help you accomplish that particular thing when you create your website.
No, that's a great point. I mean, the discovery process is key. And I think, to me, that kind of separates kind of like just somebody who's like fumbling through it to somebody who's like, okay, like I'm going to lead you through this like a professional and actually get you to the outcome that you're desiring. Jackie, when people are seeking to have their site redesigned, like, who should they be looking for? Does it depend on the type of site, and what sort of advantages and disadvantages are there to, hiring, a big agency or a consultant, or just trying to hire somebody in? What's the pros and cons?
Well, one of the things is, your budget's going to drive a lot of these decisions, and the size of your business. If you're talking about somebody that has 100 employees and they have a website, that's a completely different thing than a mom and pop shop that's got 2 employees and a very small budget for a website. So those are completely different things. A lot of people start their search on when they want to redesign by looking and seeing what competitors are using and maybe who did their sites, and kind of getting an idea of who's in your local market that you could talk to. And sometimes you're going to want to go outside of your local market. Maybe if you're in a niche market and there's a niche expert that works in that vertical, and that might be a better choice for you. But budget's going to drive a lot of those decisions. If your project tends to be on the small side, then you're probably going to be better off with an individual, a freelancer working, because you'll get more features for the money you're spending. You don't have as much overhead to cover. An agency is really good if you're larger and you're going to need people that have lots of different hats, where you need a graphic designer, you need a content strategist, and you may, and that is a big decision. If you don't know how to write any content, you don't have any content on your website yet, then picking somebody who can help you with that, if that's not your forte and you can't do that, is something to really consider when you're looking at a website. Is not just a container. It's what's in the container that really matters. And you either need to hire somebody who can help you put that together, or you need to be confident that, yes, you've got that part covered. And then you need to find the container to put your things in.
No, that's a great point. Jonathan, like, who should people be looking at, and what's the pros and cons of each approach?
Well, I agree, but also Jackie has touched this in previous roundtables. I think the whole industry is smoke and mirrors and totally sick, really. But it's down to what Jackie said. I think, first of all, for understandable reasons, it's all back to front. It's the content. You need to get all your content sorted out and have some idea what the hell you're going to put on. And it does tend to be left to the last minute, and it should be the first thing that's talked about. And if you talk to agency and they say, normally most clients, unless they've got a bit of experience, have got ridiculous time frames about how this is how much time and effort. And first of all, you need to ask around about realistic time frames, and then you soon can judge the agencies and the freelancers that are just interested in getting your money, because they're going to just say, oh yeah, we can get this done in 2 weeks. We can get this done all up and for you for this budget, and we're right, all this unique content. They're not going to do any of it. They're just going to take the deposit check, ask you for some more money halfway through the project. If you don't agree to it, they're just going to disappear. That's the real. So it's really, it's really difficult, because you also have a lot of clients, for obvious reasons, want really good value for money, but they also basically just go for the cheapest bid they get. And a lot of those people just disappear. If anything goes wrong,
the degree to which you get
off.
What you pay for, and there are people in the industry who are either they're just not competent enough to do it, or they are, as you say, deceptive. They're out to rip people off, and we've all had clients who had experiences with those kinds of people and feel very burned and nervous. I don't think that's most people in the industry, and I do think that there are people like that in every industry that there is. But it's if you're thinking about a redesign, you need to consider, how can you know that these people will actually follow through, and that usually comes back to who can you contact who is a previous client of theirs, to find out what it was like working with them.
Yes.
And I know one agency in my area who's well established, and they're con artists. I've spoken to a number of clients that have been totally ripped off by them, but I also know a lot of people in the establishment of Northern Nevada that would recommend them. I know a couple of freelancers in this area that regularly take deposits and don't produce content, produce a finished site, and it's not the one occasion, it's multiple
a deposit
occasions.
That's not worth going to small claims court over.
Well, I think a lot of people decide it's not worth them attempting that, because they got, for various reasons that I don't really want to go. But I also know there's a lot of top agencies, if it's below 10, at a certain budget, they're just going to farm it out to a junior freelancer, 12-year-old normally, and it's going to be based on a forest theme anyway, and they're just going to knock it out.
Unfortunately, that's true. It is kind of like, very often if you hire a law firm or a PR firm, it's not the partner who's really doing most of the work. It's the associate, it might be the intern, but they're billing you at the partner's rate.
Yep.
I think you need to look for, if you're looking to have your website done and you're interviewing or you're talking to people and you're doing your research, I think it would really be helpful to pay attention to the types of questions that they're asking you up front in the beginning about you. Are they interested in your business? Do they want to understand how your business works? Are they talking to you about, well, what content do you have? Do you have an existing website? Have you gone through your content? just little red flags. If you're not being asked any of those things and you are just saying, here, would you like a site like this or one like this? Pick one of these and we'll worry about all the details later. That's a red flag. That would be that they're not taking the time to understand your business and appropriately price the project, because a project that has no content where you're expecting to have a site delivered that does is a completely different price than just purchasing a theme for existing content that you already have. So I think you really need to look at that and say, when you're talking to somebody, to see if they're really interested in understanding your business and what your needs are and why. The first question I ask people when I talk to them is, why do you want to make a change right now? Why do you need a website? Either if you don't have one, why do you need one? And then if you do, why are you interested in making a change right now? And let's find out real reasons what the motivation is.
Yeah, and just to finish off before we go to our break, John, I don't get me wrong, folks. I think this applies both ends, because I hear a lot of hardcore developers say, "Oh, it's only a marketing site," and it drives me crazy when I hear that, because all I've got to say is, yeah, it might be just a marketing site, but you try and produce a marketing site that converts, that actually gets real paying clients to that client's door, and really, has a methodology of navigation and has content that actually leads to real conversion. You just try and have a go at it and see how hard it is in 2016.
Hold that thought, because I want to talk more about
it. Brother. Okay, yeah, definitely. Great points there, all. It is easy to build a site, but is it going to do what you want it to do? That's the $64,000 question. Okay, it's time for the second break, and then we come back. We'll have time for maybe one more question on the regular podcast. We'll see you in a second.
You can probably hear the trains better with the new mic, and I don't see a place to.
They sound fabulous.
Yeah, I don't see a place to mute.
So I think we better go forth.
So time for one more question, maybe, on the regular. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, and great point. We're talking website redesigns. What you should consider. A great thing to consider is, like, if you're hiring an agency or a consultant, you are just, basically paying them one off. If you hire somebody in-house, what I've found definitely is you can pay them a full salary for 6 months to a year and still not come up with something that converts. So, that is something to consider as well. One thing we were talking about before the break was, what things should you be gathering? What things should you be thinking about leading into a redesign? And, Jonathan and Jackie and Sally all said, you should be thinking about what your message is, what your content should be. How does this process go? Like, leading into a redesign, what does that look like? Focusing, what you want this to be, Sally.
Generally, I want to set up some fairly extended discovery with people to find out, not only what they know that they need and want it to do, because in some cases there's something that's really broken and frustrating to them, so that they have that problem they want to fix, and then they have maybe the overall aim of the site. It's an e-commerce site that wants to sell products, or a membership site that wants to sell subscriptions, or it's a lead generation site and you want to capture people's emails and something like that. But often I find that there are things that people need that they're not really aware of, because they don't know enough about what you can do with a website, and they may be handling something like, okay, I'm using blog posts for everything. I'm using blog posts to put events in here, or press releases in here, or specials in here, and then there's a bunch of content that's both sort of hard to sort and search. and it may be outdated and not interesting. So, looking at it and seeing, is there a better way to structure this so that it's more effective, more efficient? If you're using an events plugin, your events will expire when they're over. You're just going to see the ones that are coming up. So, and the other thing is, I hardly feel like I can write a proposal for something until I've done a decent amount of discovery, because I don't know what's needed, or how tough it's going to be. So, I think that you want to, even if you choose to hire a developer who is purely a developer and only cares about the technical problems, you need to hire someone who is a consultant to figure out which technical problems really need to be solved.
No, it's
Yeah, I totally agree with that. But you find, unless you're like a really small startup, there's various that can't afford decent discovery. But I think if it's any kind of reason, I agree totally with Sally. I think a lot of this comes because a lot of clients are really reluctant to pay for paid discovery, and they're slighting their face just to save nickel. They're nickel and diming, because a lot of their problems come to not hiring somebody who might not end up doing the site, but writes them a good discovery document and gives them some idea about what is a realistic budget, a realistic time frame, blah blah blah. At least then they've got a roadmap, and then they've got something that other companies can give realistic quotes to. Because unless you have that, they're just giving you, they're such generalistic quotes that they're meaningless. And if they underquote and it gets a bit sticky, they're off. They're gone. They're gone with your deposit, or they're just gone, because
right? Or
they can't
you have
make
this awkward situation where the developer has, I screwed up, I need to ask for more money, or they decide to suck it up, but then they're pissed at you for the entire rest of the project.
Yep.
Yeah, well, that's about it.
So, Jackie, I know you've got opinions on this. Like, what should they be doing, like, leading into redesign? What kind of structure should the business be looking for, like, when they're going into this next redesign?
I think they really need to ask themselves, what is their website doing for them, or what do they want it to do for them? I think they really need to understand that. I think many people think they need to have a website, but they're not exactly sure why, and they're not exactly sure of what are the benefits of having it. Maybe there's some benefits that they don't even realize that are there, that once you've explained it, how this website could benefit you, would change their perspective on how they wanted to approach it. I think a lot of times, many of them just, I need to get something up, let's get it up. And we've talked about this on other podcasts about, not approaching the content from the beginning is where you get off track. That's just how the whole thing kind of goes sideways from there. If you understand what the content is, what it's going to be, it makes the design go so much easier. It makes the rest of the process go easier, but it also adds more value to the project. And I think clients will recognize the value that they're getting in their website, because you're going through that process of defining what the value is for that website for them. And there's going to be cases where there's not a lot of value. There are situations where there's not a lot of value to the website, and it should be as low cost as possible. It could be, a one-page website might work for somebody just starting off in a photography studio or doing something like that. And I think we do a disservice to people, I think, when we say, we need to get you a self-hosted WordPress site. We need to get you all of these other things for something as simple as that. And that's where I think some of the miscommunication comes in the industry is not, it's because I only do self-hosted WordPress sites. That's all I'm going to recommend to you. And, or trying to talk people into things that perhaps they're not ready for, or meeting a client that has way greater needs than you're possibly able to fill, and then trying to cram all that and make it work into your workflow and how you're doing things, and not bringing in other people that can help solve some larger problems for them. So I think being open to finding some partners that you can refer business to. So if you've got somebody that needs a one-page website and that's not what you're good at doing, then network with somebody. Find somebody who's really good at that and refer those people there. And if you've got a large project that you can't handle, well, get a group together that can do it with you, or know who you can refer those things out to, so that you get a reputation of being somebody that's really solving problems and not trying to just force a solution into something, whether it's a fit or not.
It's not a crime to have a small budget, but you also know that if you have a restricted budget, you have to have restricted expectations. And, you know, maybe you start off by putting something up at Wix, or even just using your Facebook or your LinkedIn page, you know, to begin with. You know, as you grow, that's not going to be a good solution. But for the very beginning, you know, it might really be better for you to not overextend yourself and not invest too much in something that it's probably too early to see a lot of returns from.
Yep, and ask yourself what your expectations are for the website in the future. If you plan on selling products later, you need to be planning for that direction. Then, if you just need an informational brochure site and that's all you're going to be using, then, you know, no problem. If you're a dentist and you want people to be able to book appointments online and some other things in the future, well, those are things that need to be discussed with your consultant in the beginning and somebody who's helping you go through the discovery process, so that you can kind of get set up in the right direction to even add those things later on. Maybe you don't have a budget for that right now, but it's nice to have the infrastructure and pick the right infrastructure so that you can scale to that later.
Yep.
Yeah, I kind of agree with both Sally and Jackie, but I think I'm not a great fan of these.
Oh, I personally detest them,
like,
but there are people that do.
I think they got a place, but I think I think it's best it's best to have 4 really good pages than 20 mediocre pages. So all you have to go for, and also smaller clients tend to get, how to put this, that it's better to write really good 4 pages of content and not, you know, have a reasonably good looking site based on a template, but they get engrossed with the home page and the graphic, and they have expectations which their budget cannot match to, and then they get some person that hasn't done this a lot, that's not strong enough to tell them, look, just let's get some good content up for these 4 pages and get a good logo, and let's get this up and let's start getting some clients for you and make some money for you. I've seen it all. I've been in this game for about 7-8 years. I really have seen it all. I've spoken. And it's a real game, isn't it, John?
We're going to close out the podcast portion of the show. Be sure to go to WP-Tonic.com for the bonus content. You can also find that on YouTube. Want to remind you, go find us on iTunes, WP-Tonic. We'd love it if you would leave us a review and subscribe. Those reviews really help us out and help other people discover what we're sharing here. So if you enjoy this, we appreciate it if you leave us a review. You can also subscribe to us on YouTube, and leave us a comment on the videos there. So panel, outro for the podcast. How can we get a hold of you, Sally?
Sure. You can find me at WPFangirl.com, and I am at Sally Getch on Twitter and many other places. If you just search for my name, you will find me.
Very nice. Jackie, how do we get a hold of you?
You can find me at JackieDelia.com, and I'm on Twitter at JDelia.
Very good. Jonathan?
Yeah, like my great co-host said, we're going to continue the conversation for another 15-20 minutes, which is going to be on the website and also on the YouTube channel. So go there to see more of my dismal attitude. And no, folks, it's just realism. And how to get hold hold of me, well, just go to the WP-Tonic site and use the contact form. I reply personally, apart from the spammers. And go on Twitter at Jonathan Denwood. I'm always around. I'm always lurking on Twitter. So you'd be surprised how quick I reply. So that's how you get hold of me.
And you can find me at my website, which is lockdowndesign.com. And you can follow me on Twitter at lockdown_. So for the podcast, this has been episode 119. Catch us on YouTube and on the website. Okay, bonus content.
Bonus content.
Bonus.
Shall I start taking my clothes off? No, sorry.
Oh dear.
Very good, very good.
At least Jackie. I don't know what Sally thinks. At least Jackie laughs.
Very good. Hey, I had like enough questions, like for sure, to like fill the time. But like one question that I wanted to ask is just, you know, what kind of role does analytics play in determining what you're going to do for the next redesign of the site?
Oh, I think that's a great starting point to see what pages are being visited, what content is getting traction, and what isn't. And I think that's a great way to start planning off how you're going to rework content for your redesign.
It is helpful to see, you know, both which content is already popular, anything you can find out about how people are getting to your site, what kind of searches are bringing them there. And, you know, that's often not what people expect. You know, people think that prospects are going to use one sort of search term to find them, and people are actually stumbling across them in very different ways. So, you know, thinking about, and anything you can find out about that will help you in thinking about structuring things like categories and tags and titles.
And if they don't,
right, and if they don't have analytics, well, you know, you can't tell, because you can't, you know, you can't discover. You're not going to be able to say to them, and now your new site will have, you know, many times more visitors, because they may not have information on that. A lot of hosting companies have some kind of stats. You know, they're not as pretty as Google Analytics, but you can get information there.
Fast.
you can also do some keyword searches
That's a
too.
good point.
Sorry.
That's fine, Jane. I just want to kind of wrap up what I said. I personally be interested to see if Sandy and Jackie agrees with me. I really think if you've got a budget below 10,000, even if it's e-commerce membership, and you're looking at below 10 grand, I think you're better. You're going to get a lot better value from an experienced consultant freelancer that's got a few years under their belt, that's got a few sites, then going to agency, and I think most experienced WordPress consultants and developers stroke designers will be able to give you a really more personalized boutique and better quality solution around that price point.
I think that
what do you reckon,
is
Sally?
Frequently going to be true. You know, I think it depends quite a bit on the agency and on some other things. But of course, you know, agencies do have greater overhead. They're paying salaries. They're paying, you know, the cost is probably going to be more. They may be able to deliver value equal to that cost. But if you've got, you know, if you say this is the money I have and it's all the money I have, and, you know, whether or not I would like to, I cannot spend more on a site, then you might well be better off working with a freelancer. You know who's going to be actually doing the work on the site versus, you know, the people you deal with at the agency may not be the people who are actually building the site. And if the person has a good variety of experience, then they can do well for you. And they may, you know, there may be specifics that they either subcontract out or that they suggest you find, you know, an SEO specialist to you know, help with SEO things, or a writer to help with your copy if you don't have it. You know, it's, you know, I can do a lot of different things for a website. You know, I can do content strategy, I can do copyright, I can do, you know, the PHP, and I can do the CSS. I cannot do them all at once. So, if you are in a position where you can wait for somebody to do these things sequentially, then having one person do them, if they have the skills, is fine. If you are not in a position where you can wait, where you're really going to benefit from having, the designer working here and the writer working here, and where you have people working in parallel, then you either need an agency or you need somebody who is informally an agency because they have a team of reliable subcontractors that they work with.
Yeah, I think that was a great point.
I agree.
That's I think it's just common sense. If somebody's involved in the local business community and they've been around a few years, and they're bound to fall out with some people because there's personality, or they have had to tell the person it works both ways, being ripped off, doesn't it? But if somebody's got a consistently not finished projects consistently and haven't given deposits back, but what I'm surprised at is that there's a few people I know in Northern Nevada that have a consistent track record of what I've dismally laid out, and they still get a fair bit of custom, and they're still in business, and it just surprises me in a way. But maybe I'm being naive.
It's a grave miscarriage of justice, but
it doesn't surprise me.
That
That's
unusual.
everywhere. That's everywhere. No, I think it's definitely something people should do their research. And I think depending on what city you're in, it could get overwhelming. Like Jackie is in
Yes.
Charlotte, North Carolina, right? Yeah, it's a pretty fair-sized city. Sally's in East Bay. There's a lot of stuff to sort through, and I'm sure there's a ton of agencies.
There's an army of them.
So, it does get overwhelming. But what I think that most people do is they either take a recommendation from someone they know, and they just go with that, or they go to Google and they pick like maybe the top, maybe the top 5, top 10, and then just go through that and pick like a couple out of that. And that's who they're calling.
I think another thing that's helpful too is if you can find somebody who understands your business. Like John, you work with a lot of local businesses, right? So you have a feel for that market there and what's going on there.
Mm-hmm.
I have a horticulture background, so I've done a couple of garden center websites. If a garden center wants a new website, I'm going to be much better at helping them come up with a design and come up with a content strategy and other things than somebody who has never had any experience with any of that. And likely, and the reverse of that is I'm not going to be as experienced if I need to do a site for an attorney or something where I haven't done something in that field yet, or I don't understand how that business operates. When you're working with the content strategy side, understanding the business is really important. So if you can find somebody that's involved in that industry or is aware of how that works, that can make a big difference too. It can help out.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic, Jackie, and a great point. I had a discussion beginning of this week with a client, and they got multiple business, and they were asking some advice about. I'm not going to delve into about it because I don't want it identified. But they got another business and the site is really old and really quite bad in content, in look. But the actual business is really top notch, and it's sad, really. And that particular business, they're struggling. And they were saying, well, could you do some SEO optimization? And I said, no. I said, I can't because there's nothing to optimize. And I'll be doing you a disfavor. Because actually, I feel, and I think they were surprised by my answer, but I think they came back by email and they thanked me. Actually, they thanked me for my honesty because I said, "You don't want people going to this website. You don't want people see this because this is hurting your business, and it's a shame because your business is really good, but this site is a nightmare, and you want to be thankful that nobody's going there and seeing it."
That's a great point
and
too.
they're going to think about it, and at some stage they might, but they certainly don't want to spend any time on paid advertisement, which they were talking about, Facebook, and also optimizing the site, because they certainly don't want anybody going to that
consulting
site.
job once where I was hired to basically find out why this person's advertising campaign hadn't brought in any noticeable sales. And, this was one thing where I looked at the analytics and so on, and it's sort of like, all right, people are coming to your homepage from the link in this ad, and there's no purchase the product link on your homepage. Not even getting to the shopping cart to abandon it. And so, you either need to, have the link in your ad go directly to your purchase page, or you need to revise your website so that it's clear to people where and how they can buy. Otherwise, bringing them there isn't doing you any good at all.
No, it's there was a point. There was somebody that I seen, they tweeted this out before, is a similar thing, where it was like a tire shop or something. They were spending like 50 grand on AdWords or something like that, or 15,000 a month, or some ridiculous amount. And it was going to a page where it was like a location finder, and it didn't work. And this, it's like little things like that. And people don't get that. They want you to flip like the SEO switch. Like they think it's like just like that. Like if I pay you some money, you can flip the SEO switch and all my problems will be solved. But if your website looks like it's straight out of 1995,
right?
No, I can't.
One of these days, when I have time, I'm going to write a post called "SEO is not a
bigger." I mean, that's
that's a great title.
That's awesome.
Actually.
That's a great title.
But they do have, actually you'd be doing them a disservice by getting any traffic going there, because they're not going to buy. They're probably going to go to competitors. They're going to bounce off to competitors' sites, and they're going to be more influenced to go and use the competitor after going to your crummy website. So
it's a good point. It's like look at your competitor. Now look at your site that your nephew made. Now look at your competitor, and look at the site that your nephew made. You see why you're and it's like, you see why you're losing business. You see why you're not ranking. I mean, but people don't connect it. You know what I mean? And it's sometimes you really have to have that hard discussion with them, and sometimes they don't get it. But that's your nephew can't always redesign your site. Yeah, I mean, that's a hard reality. Have you ever had that happen?
I have, and that even goes back to, I built an e-commerce business that I did for 10 years. So, and I didn't like paying for ads. This was back 10 years ago. So I really didn't like paying for ads. So I really focused on writing good content and doing a lot of good interlinks between pages and building a good network of information that was of value to the user, right? So that was the whole goal, was, making it helpful to the user to find what it was that they wanted. And I think that takes a lot of effort. And I think that isn't something an amateur can do. It took me a long time to learn how to do that. When I first started, I didn't know much about that, but I was determined to learn how that worked, and I did. But it's not a light switch. So it's a process. I went from selling a product that I was like on page 3 or 4 in Google Natural Search to being #1 in Google Natural Search above the manufacturer. And this was a product other companies were selling as well. Other competitors were. But it took me maybe a year to get there. But it was a slow and steady progression of refinements on the content, adding more unique content, and building a network of links about it that really paid off. And that is so much more valuable than spending 5 years worth of AdSense money to keep traffic coming. I think it to this day, that site is still, I think it ranks like #3 in natural search. I don't own the business anymore, but it still does. And you're talking about maybe 5 or 6 years later without any intervention at all. It's just, those things really do matter. And that's where it takes time and effort to do that, though. It's not magic.
Yeah, people don't want to hear that SEO is work.
No,
It is
so,
work.
I think they're great. I think it's
Sprinkle
great points. I
SEO
think we
dust.
better end this, John, before Fire Talk kicks us out.
Right. Cut this off.
Yeah, before it says.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
y'all.
So
Well, it was
thanks.
great.
We'll see you. Thanks. We'll see you next week.
Thank you so much for being here, Jackie. Your contributions are always awesome. Thank you for being here, Sally. I cannot. When is your guys' episode dropping on
Wednesday.
iTunes?
No,
Is it already
I don't
dropped,
know.
or is
It was.
it
It is
coming
going
out
to be the
soon?
next one, though.
it goes out
Nice.
this coming Wednesday.
Yeah, thank you, Jackie and
Very,
Sally.
very
I
good.
think we've had another great discussion, and
It's
I've been
always enlightening.
I've been English dismal, haven't I? But there we go.
Jonathan,
There you go. English it
I'm
up.
depressed after listening to you, and I'm going to need to go for a walk to clear my head now.
I wasn't that bad. I was just telling it how it is. You just gotta
Yes.
have your eyes open, be realistic. You know, it's just like finding a decent car mechanic or anything, isn't it? You know, there's loads of people in the game, but you know, I got a fantastic car mechanic, but it took me 2-3 years to find one, and I got ripped off before I found him. But now he does the job, pay him. I think it's good value. He's happy. He puts up with my humour. Everybody's happy.
Yeah, it is. You know.
There you go. It's about relationship.
And there are, I had an email from AAA the other day saying, like, learn to spot a car repair scam a mile away or something like that. And it's like, well, I know my mechanic. I've built up trust with him because he's done a decent job repairing my car for a reasonable amount of money. As long as I keep going to this mechanic, I don't think I have to worry about the scams. But so many people are ripe for the scams, and I think they're especially ripe for the tech-oriented scams because they don't know enough to know that if somebody phones and promises to put them on the first page of Google, it's very unlikely that's possible.
They're like,
right?
Oh, that sounds good.
Kick me out.
All right.
Kick me out, John.
Bye, everybody.
Okay, yeah, we're gonna end it before Fire Talks begins. It's okay. Thank you, everyone who tuned in and is still here in the chat room. Let's name them if I got time. I know Cheryl Lynn was here,
Daphne.
and Daphne. Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
So,
See you later.
bye. See ya.
Yeah, we did. See you later.